Well, thank you very much, Bonnie, and it is really an honor for me to be here today to be addressing the people here in the state of North Carolina. I actually had an opportunity to take a look around at this wonderful town and what's going on here at the university, and I can tell you that knowledge, innovation, as you'll see in my talk, is really a cornerstone of our future in the United States. And we really see that moving forward, and I can tell you that North Carolina is really putting forward a tremendous benchmark for our country. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the blueprint for national manufacturing. Like you've heard a number of our speakers already previously talk about how important manufacturing is to the country, and let's just get right into it. So, why does manufacturing matter? 70% of the research and development and 90% of the patents issued in the United States are related to manufacturing. And I don't think that that should be a big surprise. Manufacturing is very broad. Manufacturing is very important to our economy and to our national security. And so there are significant investments there, and we are reaping the rewards. But there's also a significant connection between manufacturing and design and research and development. So these three go hand in hand. And the health of what we would call the industrial commons, okay, the know-how, the process, I mean, what really makes this country great is tied directly into manufacturing. And not just, hey, what's the next generation idea, but how do we bring those products to the market? I think many of you know, I looked at some of the attendees lists in terms of businesses and so forth. It's one thing to do something on the benchtop or in the lab, or in some cases in your garage. It's another thing to make thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of your design. And you've got to be innovative in terms of how you scale it up. So both product and process. If we take a look from an economic perspective, manufacturing is by far the leading economic multiplier. So for every dollar spent in manufacturing, the economy reaps about $1.40 in terms of benefits. So basically, for every dollar, we get another $1.40 leverage out of it. And as I mentioned before, it is critical for our national security. Think about everything that goes into our systems, such as the F-35. Everything from the advanced materials, the lightweight materials. Again, we know a lot of good research going on here in North Carolina, a lot of good industry. The composites area, the lightweight materials. All the way to the high temperature materials on the jet engines that allow us to move forward not only in jet engines but in energy efficiency to leverage our capabilities here in the country. All the way to the microelectronics, to every chip. The same chip that you have in your cell phone that we also may use in some of our more advanced systems from the defense area. So there are some tremendous opportunities there in manufacturing, economic, and national security. And if we take a look at, so we go to the next slide, please. There we go. If we take a look at expenditures, okay, on research and development, the U.S. still out-invests the world. So there's no doubt about it, and that investment in R&D from the federal sector has been increasing in the recent past, but others are catching up. Others realize this. I think we heard this from Mr. Liveris, right? There are other countries that get it, and there are competition, and they are investing heavily. And in fact, if you look at the chart on the right, the bar chart, basically you see that change in investment is significant. In particular, China, Singapore, Finland. So these countries are rapidly growing their research and development capabilities, in particular in the manufacturing sector. So what are we looking at? What are we looking at in terms of the administration and moving things forward? Well, basically, as Mr. Liveris pointed out, PCAS, the President's Council Advisors on Science and Technology, issued a report, and that first one was back in June of 2009, on ensuring advanced manufacturing. So this particular report, and these are out there, and I won't go through all the details, basically said, look, advanced manufacturing is important to our country, to our national well-being. A year ago, we heard that in the State of the Union. The President mentioned 15 times the word manufacturing. Clearly, it's on our mind. And it's not just the President. We hear it from Congress. We hear it from state leadership. We hear it from local leadership. So manufacturing is critical. Then there was the National Science and Technology Council report that came out on a strategic plan for advanced manufacturing. Again, talking about what the direction should be for advanced manufacturing. And again, advanced manufacturing, this is not, well, let's tighten the nuts and bolts on a car. Because if you look at that, the cost difference in terms of the labor, it's very difficult to compete with low-cost countries such as China or India. Although, again, their costs are going up, but the reality is those are not the types of jobs that we want. We want the high-tech jobs. We want the high-value-added jobs. These are where we can compete, and we'll talk about that direction momentarily. Then, of course, in March 2012, Cross Point, Virginia, the President announced the pilot program for the National Network for Manufacturing Innovation. So this is a network of centers, and I will talk about those briefly, that allow us to innovate in the manufacturing area, to allow us to bring together partnerships, again, as was just mentioned, public-private partnerships to really leverage our capabilities here in the U.S. at the national level, at the state level, at the local level for industry, to bring them all together. And by the way, also very important here are the small and medium-sized enterprises. Okay, so engaging everybody. I think as Governor Hunt mentioned, the local communities are critical to engage them. Everybody likes to see the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, come in and put in a plant. But for every one of those jobs, we get 8 supplier jobs. That's not to mention the service sector jobs that come along with that as well. So these are key. And I think it's important also to note that it's not just about a single, very narrow local area. So a plant comes into an area, yes, this is exciting, but that generates job opportunities critically around the region. So a new automotive plant comes in, for example, the Volkswagen plant in Tennessee. That created jobs not only in Tennessee, but in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, the whole region. They located in Tennessee because of the supply base, and that supply base expanded. So it is good across the board. If we take a look, now the last one on my timeline was the July 2012. That was the recommendation. That's when we released our recommendations, as again Mr. Liveris mentioned, from the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership Steering Committee out of PCAST, out of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. And again, 3 key areas with 16 recommendations for action. All right, I only have a limited time here, so I won't go through all of those. But let me talk to you about the 3 areas. All right, and the first 2 are the ones that my team really takes a look at. So I'm from the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So how are we going to move forward with technology? And what policies do we need there? First one is enabling innovation. And this really speaks to the power of the American society, of our culture. We are innovative. We're spending a good chunk of time in academia. And again, actually, here so close to the campus of North Carolina State University, we see this. We see countries all over the world sending their students here to learn. So much of that is to understand our culture, is to understand our capability for innovation. We have a significant advantage there. We need to enable that innovation. We need to enable our manufacturers to deploy that innovation, whether it's a new product or whether it's a new process to move our products forward. Okay? This is important for the U.S. Yes, I mean, we already heard people will copy. Countries will copy. But that's okay. The next product will come out, and we need to be able to deploy that next product rapidly in the marketplace. I'll just give you an example, right? The iPhone. The iPhone 5 comes out. What happens to the sales of the previous version? Okay, they plummet. And this is exactly where we see things are going. And by the way, it's not just about being able to make things faster, better, at lower costs, but it's the ability to enable and to embrace new market strategies and new paradigms that are out there. So we heard about additive manufacturing, building things up. I no longer want to drill a hole. I want to put material around some empty space. You know, by the way, that doesn't need to be a circle, that hole, and it doesn't need to have a constant cross-section. We can do other things. We need to think outside of the box. And the U.S., by far and away, is the best at thinking outside of the box. This is where we're looking at. Much of the technology that's coming along will change how we think, how our businesses operate. If you don't believe me, just think about file sharing. Right? 10, 15 years ago, everybody was concerned about it and so forth with music, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Steve Jobs comes along, says this is how we're going to do it, and now it's tremendous success. Right? We've eliminated the need, we don't have to make records anymore, we don't have to make compact discs anymore. You just go online and you buy it. The entire supply chain is shifted around. We've created a significant value. And interestingly enough, for the small entrepreneur, for that small band or singer or performer out there, they have an opportunity to get out there and make a difference individually, as opposed to trying to scale up in terms of, you know, major investments for recording and so forth. The same thing we're going to see happening with respect to manufacturing. The second point on the recommendations is securing the talent pipeline. And I will tell you, this is important. We need the workforce to move forward in terms of our capabilities here in the United States. And we talk about the next generation workforce and, you know, what people are doing and training our children. I tell you this, it's not only about training our workforce, our next generation, it's also about training our current generation. Think about it. You're in the workforce for 30, 40 years. Think about the car. So I come out of the automotive sector. Think about the car from 40 years ago, all right, and how the technology has changed. Think about the cell phone from 40 years ago. Well, wait, no cell phone 40 years ago, right? I mean, even the cell phone 5 years ago. And so we need to make sure that our workforce, whether it's, you know, our children who are coming online in the next few years, or those people who have been in the workforce for 20 or 30 years, are prepared for the next generation technologies, because they're coming and they are coming faster. Things are changing faster. So we've got to do that. That also includes, by the way, making sure that our K through 12 understand what's going on. If I ask you about manufacturing, a lot of people say, well, yeah, I learned about that in history class, and it was like Henry Ford, and that's 100 years ago. You go to a plant today, it's a gorgeous place. It's clean, and in fact, the statement is it's so clean you can eat off the floor. But I guarantee you, if you tried to eat off the floor, they would be very upset because you would mess up that production facility, okay? So this is what we have to do, and then engaging, I think the community colleges are key players here. These are the ones that are going to actually help us to continue to retrain our workforce so that we are ready to tackle the challenges of the future. The third point is a little bit outside of my areas, and we heard again from Mr. Liveris, is improving the business climate. So we have to move forward, you know, in a number of these things. And again, he added them in terms of reforms, regulatory policies, energy policies, and these are things that we need to think about. And the U.S. has significant resources and capabilities in these areas. So let me talk a little bit about the National Network for Manufacturing Innovation. So the idea here is to put up some of these centers. Right now we're thinking up to 15 of these, where basically you have a center, a collective, that companies and universities and individuals can go to look at innovation, to understand new innovation. But these are not about fundamental research. These are taking the ideas, the fundamental research in the United States, and moving it forward to production levels. We have a tremendous, as I mentioned before, university system, national lab system, excellent in terms of the fundamental research, but it's moving it to the next level, taking it from that lab bench into production. That is critical. And this is what the President announced, okay, over at Crosspoint in Virginia back in March in terms of moving it forward. We already have a pilot facility. This is our National Additive Manufacturing Center. And the exciting thing about this is not only has it inspired the people in the center, which is located in the Ohio area, but we see other centers cropping up. So in terms of leveraging the capabilities of the federal dollars, dollar for dollar match, in fact, we had $39 million. It was a $30 million project, $39 million, and then continues to grow, match from industry. So clearly an exciting opportunity. And really, again, as I mentioned, what we're looking at is to fill that middle. We want to be able to bridge between the basic research and production. And not only for the big companies, but also for what we would call the SMEs, the small and medium-sized enterprises. Because these are the ones that really need the input. They can't afford putting in $1 million for a piece of equipment just to try something out, just to do some research. But the federal government has this capability. Or we can leverage these capabilities and we can partner together to work. And there are a number of excellent models along those lines, such as Semitech, right, where they're actually developing electronic circuits, moving now into some of the optical areas that are allowing some of our small companies to do electronics development that prior to this would really be out of their reach. So again, leveraging this capability, helping to move it forward, and then training our workforce. And by the way, I'm going to point out, training the workforce is so important across all sectors, okay? The people think, oh, carbon fiber composites, great, we'll put it in a car. I will tell you this, the first time you back your car, as you're pulling out of the parking lot and maybe scrape the concrete pillar in there, right? What do you do now? You go to the body shop, puts a little hole in there, pops out the dent, little Bondo, sands it off, and you're all set, little paint. That won't happen with carbon fiber composites. So we've got to train people all the way from the engineers who design these vehicles with these composites, all the way down to the people in the shops who are going to repair these composites. So it's an entire spectrum in order to make it useful. Otherwise, nobody will buy one of these cars, right? But I can tell you that lightweight material is going to be a key player in allowing us to get our fuel efficiencies that have been targeted in the future. So in terms of the different initiatives, yes, we have the National Network for Manufacturing Innovation, okay? And this is basically getting that technology out, clustering people together, clustering groups together, leveraging our universities and our community colleges to enable innovation and also to train the next generation workforce. But in other areas, such as big data, right? So a lot of these places are generating large amounts of data. How do we use that data to improve our productivity, all right? This is key aspect as our systems, and if you've gone, by the way, if you haven't been in a modern manufacturing facility, I strongly encourage you to do that. All the robots, all the computers and so forth, by the way, people programming them, right? And all that information you can use to improve your process and your product. So big data is important. Robotics are going to be important. We're going to see some big robotics initiatives, whether it's out in the field. You can see it in some of the, go look up Big Dog, really interesting military videos there, in terms of just moving heavy loads around, but also having robots work with people. Turns out right now, robots are good at certain tasks and people are good at other tasks, but if you can marry the two in a safe fashion, a lot of work to be done there, but you can be highly productive. And finally, actually, the slide, the image I have here is really the materials genome. So these new materials that are coming along, they take years to develop. Our objectives are to cut in half the development time for those materials. And again, moving those materials forward, getting them out into our products, this is where we can be successful in the United States because we are very good at rapid innovation. We now need to be very good at rapid deployment of that innovation into the market space to keep ahead of our competition. So, I'll just wrap it up here. This is my friend, the KUKA Titan 1000 robot, all right? And I can tell you that, yes, in fact, this one, I think about 320 went into the BMW plant, which is down the street from here in South Carolina. Yes, they went in. They made the plant more efficient. They created jobs in terms of programming and so forth. And yes, of course, they replaced some people. But that plant was so efficient, they doubled in size. So what you lost in terms of a few low-end jobs, you more than made up for in terms of the plant expansion because of its efficiency, because you could make that car in the United States and you could make money doing it. There's no doubt about it. Okay? 75% of that BMW's plant's production is exported overseas. People don't get that. You go to Japan, you drive a Japanese car, there's a good chance the engine came from the United States. Yes, we're making things here in the U.S. We're making our mark. But it is about wealth creation. You have to build things. You can't just push paper around. It's got to be sustainable. It's got to be efficient. We've got to enable our small and medium-sized enterprises, the suppliers, the mom-and-pop shops. These are the backbone of our economy. It is important for the national well-being. It's important for our leadership in the world. And for the United States of America, the bottom line is whether it's economic prosperity or national security, manufacturing is critical. And we have our place in the world as leaders in manufacturing. And let me just give you this statement from Eric Hoffer. And I think it really goes towards education and why our system is so important. The education is so important to manufacturing. In times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. I really want you to think about that, because that is the direction that we need to go. The world is changing rapidly, and it's changing faster every day. And let me close with just a statement that was made in the State of the Union last year by the President. Let's see, can we have the next slide? There we go. And I think that this really brings together what a lot of Americans think about. My grandparents who came here in the 20s think about America within our reach, a country that leads the world in educating its people, an America that attracts a new generation of high-tech manufacturing and high-paying jobs, a future where we're in control of our own energy and our security and prosperity aren't so tied to unstable parts of the world. This goes right back to what Mr. Liver has said about you want to reduce that uncertainty. Very important. And by the way, that's a tremendous advantage of the United States of America. It's an economy built to last, and I think right here, this is what my grandparents often thought about when they came here, and I think what many of our forefathers and many of our fellow citizens think about today, and how it should be, by the way, where hard work pays off and responsibility is rewarded. Thank you very much for your attention.
Tom, thank you, and thank you also for agreeing to be with us all day, because I suspect that there are going to be lots of people who want to bend your ear during the breaks. I am going to ask one question. It's actually one that came in earlier, but I think has great applicability to the presentation you just shared with us. And for those of you who are sending in questions, let me just remind you, you can hit the Ask a Question button on the tablets, or you may send a question to emergingissues@ncsu.edu. That's our email address. Or you may send your tweet to Emerging Issues. The hashtag is MFGWorks. I better go look at that, make sure that's true. Yep, all right. So here's the question. We've talked a lot this morning about these jobs that are predicted to come from manufacturing, and everybody's pretty excited about that. But we want to do a little bit of a reality check and think a little bit about why those jobs are going to come here to the United States rather than to other places like China, which Andrew Liveris just reminded us is rapidly rising to the top of the manufacturing ladder. I suspect that question is at the core of a lot of the initiatives coming out of the executive branch, and I wondered if you might respond to that quickly.
Sure. Well, again, we're looking at so why would the jobs come here as opposed to China? Right. looking at the high-tech jobs, the high-end jobs, and the jobs really that are going to be using the latest and greatest technology. So, number one, in terms of our workforce, you have the right workforce capability and so forth. I mean, we really do have a highly trained workforce, and we have the capability to move that workforce forward. For China to move their workforce forward, I mean, it's enormous, right? And so to try and execute that education and so forth is a very difficult task. The other thing, in terms of the high-tech strategy, okay, so if you take a look at a production facility here, they're very high-tech, very highly automated across the board. I mean, all the way down into the small and medium-sized enterprises. So as we start to link these things together, we really do get a return, in terms of the technology preparedness and capability in our production systems that they don't have overseas. So the infrastructure, the training, and then the flexibility within the United States give us a significant advantage over China. Yeah, if you're going to make little bitty plastic parts, okay, but in terms of next generation technology, where the real profits are, here's the place to be.
Well, I've seen Bonnie just beaming at you throughout your entire presentation, in large part because your responses to our working group strategies prove the brilliance of the working group on which Bonnie sat. I want to thank you again for being with us.